There it
All
goes.
right. Yeah. We're live on Twitter.
And we're live. It is Friday, April 9th, 5:01 p.m. Eastern Time. And we're not allowed to have fun anymore. But we are allowed to watch Windsor Mann have an endless number of rooms that he apparently is trying to rate my room rater.
Well, let's
to
see the
rate.
whole room, Kate.
Yeah, I feel like this is absolutely phenomenal. Oh my God.
It's the same room, though, isn't it?
No, it's not.
The last time you were. Yeah, I think it is.
so.
No, the last time when I asked
No,
Nick
it's not.
a question, I was upstairs in this tiny little office that's
But
just purely for utility.
But you have done in lieu of fun from this in it little Washington type room.
The first time was October 1st, and it was in this room. I remember it was October 1st because that was also the last time I got a haircut. So October 1st, and so now I have this mullet going.
You do have a mullet going.
Beard. This is cleanly shaven by my standards, and I have a mullet. And then I was on with Virginia Heffernan in December, I think.
Right,
and that was on the sofa right there, and I was facing this way.
Okay, it's just an excellent.
Someone just said last time was from a walk-in closet. That's Dave said that, which is pretty accurate. It's this tiny room. It has just this tiny little desk.
So I assume you are in Little Washington now, right?
Yes, sir.
So for those in the audience, including perhaps Kate, who do not know what
idea what this is,
what Little Washington is, can you explain it?
I'm not sure I can, but well, my mom lives here, so this is my mom's house. I should make that clear. Like if I were doing this at my apartment in DC, it would not be nice. This is, all praise to my mom. Shout out to Ruthie. She lives here. She moved here in 2010, and it's just this. It's about it's 60 something miles from DC, but an hour and a half drive. And the inn is here. The inn at Little Washington. It's like a Michelin star, it's like just this unbelievable restaurant. And does that explain it? It's just this tiny little town.
It's a tiny little town in Rappahannock County, Virginia, that is basically all the houses are there's no new building. It's this town that was it's only about 50 or 60 houses total, right? It's a tiny little.
I don't know how many. My mom is actually outside the town, so she's 0.8 miles from it. So she's kind of got a little bit of the like looking out. There's a barn over there, and it's a lot of rural farmland, and there are horses and stuff across the street. So it's pretty rural.
Yeah,
that's a word I've actually been working on because I have a hard time saying rural. If you're from a rural part of the South, rural is a very hard word.
But it's not. The thing about Little Washington is that it's like you do feel like you are driving into the early 19th century, but for the car.
Yeah.
And the inn.
There has to be some serious historic preservation laws and zoning laws in place for it to stay that way.
Very strict zoning laws. Very strict zoning.
And the inn has bought up a lot of the property in town in order to restore these incredible old buildings. And then they do, people come there because it's far enough from Washington. If you go there for dinner, you tend to have to stay the night. And so there's a kind of, there are these gorgeous, gorgeous old houses that have been lovingly redone, and cool. It's a pretty amazing little village.
Have you eaten at the inn?
I have once. I think I couldn't really afford to do it a second time.
Is it like really that expensive? Is it like per se?
It's crazy expensive.
But it's hundreds.
Yeah, it's many, many
If you live in
hundreds
the
of dollars.
county, you get a discount. Sorry, I feel like I'm interrupting.
No.
If you live in the county, you have a discount January, February, and March. So I've eaten there in those months, and it's awesome. But there's also another restaurant in Sperryville called Three Blacksmiths, which is also amazing. I highly recommend it.
Rural Virginia has an incredible collection of restaurants because there's also, if you go down in the Charlottesville area, the Barbersville Vineyard, which is this incredible. So Barbersville is built around an octagonal house that Thomas Jefferson designed for the governor of Virginia, a guy named Barber. And Jefferson designed this beautiful octagonal stone house, and it burned down in the 1850s. And so the ruin of this Jefferson designed octagonal house is on this property. And there's just an incredible restaurant there. And I don't, there's a bunch of these places in places that just, it's not obvious to me how they have the economic, how they're generating the wealth to support these restaurants, frankly. But it's an amazing group of restaurants, if you drive around rural Virginia and you know where you're going.
So have I
and
ever
at Barbersville?
Go ahead, Windsor. I'm just like, I think I'm on a slight lag, and I think it's my fault because I think my internet's a little janky today.
I am
Sorry.
Too.
My internet is perfect. None of it's my fault.
Well, at Barbersville, they have first of all, the Cab Franc is fantastic. That's my favorite one of theirs. Also, they have one called, I think, the Octagon or something like that. And they serve it at every party at the British Embassy. So that kind of connects to the news I've heard that happened with someone in England. But yeah.
So I don't think I've ever talked about this, but I come by my property interest and like my historic preservation interest kind of very honestly. When I grew up in what they call a cobblestone house, and I will see if I can share my screen really quickly and show a picture of it. I just dropped it in the chat. But my parents bought from a historical society in upstate New York, what was called a cobblestone house. And it was, this specific house has its own Wikipedia page that I had no idea of until I just Googled it.
Wow.
But this is, so that is the house. There's lots of pictures of little Kate on that front stoop. And I used to sit on that front stoop and suck on lemons and wait for my mom to get home from work. But that's that. My parents restored this house, and I lived there until I was 3 or 4. But that's an awesome house. Yeah, isn't that kind of cool? So and it's all built out of like river stones, like cobblestones, obviously. So it's called Cobblestone House, but
Who knew that?
Where'd you say that is?
It's in a small town called Macedon, New York, which is in like very rural Western New York outside of Rochester. Yeah.
I was not born in a house like that, I'm afraid. I was born in this house. Hang on. This is the house I was born in. It was just sort of a log cabin. But it was home, and we loved it. And
you made do.
We made do. We
Oh, come on, that house.
And there are
pictures.
Tiny. And there are pictures of me on the stoop of that house, eating cake that was being served to me by Marie Antoinette herself.
But that little house had the walls are 1.5 feet thick because they're all of the insulation is horsehair mixed with plaster. So like it's like a very old house, and there's all kinds of kind of cool things about it like that. And but because the walls are so thick, the house is like a shoebox. it's so tiny. And of course, people were shorter then, and so like the door frames are really short,
Right.
and like so and so all of those. I mean, it was like real things in colonial like time when you go back and you go to these houses, and anyways, it was kind of just a cool story. I don't know.
So Windsor, I have a very serious question for you.
Okay, great.
What are you doing now that the Trump era
I'm not answering that.
Is over? I mean,
I'm not answering that.
How do you organize your mind?
Jokingly.
I mean,
well, I've compared.
Like, what do you think about
my current state to? Well, I'm so burnt out on politics. But I'm kind of like United States after the Soviet Union collapsed, like relieved, but also exhausted and ambivalent and confused about my role in the world. I mean, the world, that's a bit grandiose, but yeah, I mean, that's the United States and, 91, 92, 93, 94 was kind of didn't know what it was supposed to do in the world. And I'm kind of like, okay. I mean, it was such a cause defeating Trump for me that, I put so much passion into that. And now I'm just kind of like, okay, I'm so happy he's gone. But it's kind of like, okay, now I'm gonna like, I have tried to be outraged about Matt Gaetz and Marjorie Taylor Greene, and I am a bit, but they're small fish compared to Trump, and it's kind of like I don't want to get into the funny outrage too, the kind that I hate when other people do it. So, and I don't like I don't like what the Republicans in Georgia are doing, but I can't summon the outrage that Trump just made me feel automatically. So I'm just kind of just trying to acknowledge that and just kind of accepting it. I sort of helped my friend Michael Ian Black. He wrote a piece for Shouts and Murmurs at New Yorker, so I kind of helped him with that. So I kind of like the humor writing now. That was fun for me doing that. And I mean, he got the byline, but he said the esteem is ours, but only he gets the credit or something like that. I mean, he
they
really
don't do
wrote it, but
they don't
but I
do any they don't do any co-bylines at the New Yorker ever.
I didn't do enough to even merit a co-byline anyway, but that was fun. But just kind of writing about politics, I just find it just kind of, I don't know, but I'm going to need to soon. I was thinking about writing a book about conservative victimhood. I wrote an op-ed about it 2 years ago that now seems, I'm not going to say prophetic because it was pretty obvious then too, but it seems just so much more pertinent now. With Josh Hawley claiming it was silence, and then there are all kinds of people now, but that's really when I was like, okay, this could really be a book. And Charlie Sykes wrote a book about victimhood in '92, and he had a lot of good observations.
It's been a while since 1992. Like some things have happened to conservatives.
Well, but also Charlie.
Yeah, I graduated from middle school.
I mean, Charlie in 1992, when he's writing Nation of Victims, is writing about liberal whiners primarily, and he has some warnings in there that conservatives shouldn't jump on this train, right? He's got this loose idea that, well, what if we, and he's speaking as a conservative. He's a conservative radio talk show host. Then his understanding of it is this isn't a bandwagon that we would ever jump on. And then, of course, he is shocked over 20 years later to find that is, in fact, a very comfortable place for conservatives. So here's my question about this. Why does it happen? Is it because, so one explanation of this is actually the left won. They won the whole vocabulary war. And so if you want to have status in society, you have to claim the status comes through victimization. It's the opposite of Nietzsche, or maybe it is Nietzsche, right? Like it's the victory of the meek. The meek shall inherit the earth because they tie down the strong. and they use it, and the vocabulary for that is victim status. And so conservatives accepting the left's vocabulary become victims in their own minds by way of establishing status. The second possibility is that it's actually something completely different. It's that they're morally persuaded by the left's argument, that they understand that the labor union, the labor movement has the moral high ground. They understand that African Americans have a moral high ground in talking about, a certain set of issues, right? That and that because they feel that they speak for an authentic moral voice, they have to be victims in order to have the moral voice that they instinctively organize themselves around. And a third possibility is it's actually bullshit, and they simply adopt it as a kind of pose. And so my question is, what do you think is behind it?
I think it's the first possibility. That's my gut reaction. I mean, I haven't started this book. I was just kind of thinking about it. But I think, have you read Richard Hofstadter's essays on, Daniel Bell came out with a book called The New American Right, and I think it came out in early 60s, maybe 62. And Daniel Bell, who's a sociologist, and Seymour Martin Lipset and Richard Hofstadter, who else was in that? They all had contributions to it, and they wrote about this new phenomenon called status politics. And it was against like interest politics, so it was against like fighting for a higher wage and that sort of thing. And it was kind of it was what motivated the McCarthyites and that group, and it was all status driven. And I think that's what's kind of driving. I could be totally wrong about this, by the way, but this is just my hunch. It was driving these people, and I think they're sincere. I don't think they're. I mean, I have conservative friends, and they bitch about this stuff all the time. They feel like the officially recognized victims are victimizing them, and they truly feel like white males are everyone's coming after them. And once also the original victim groups, which was Black Americans and women and I guess Jews and I guess the disabled, they were actually kind of later. And so it kept on growing, the officially recognized victim groups. So eventually there were enough of them, so it felt like they outnumbered white males, I guess. And so they did kind of feel like their back was up against the wall, I guess. That's just my hunch. I haven't started this book. I haven't even started reading it. I don't know if I'm going to write it, but that's just my hunch.
What do you think, Kate? What do you think is the source of the conservative victimology complex?
I think that's a loss of power. I mean, I think it's legitimately like a white, like, I think that it's like, I buy into the argument that there is some aspect of which it's like, I think white supremacy puts too much intentionality on it. I think it's more unconscious than that, but I think that I think the conservative communities and like people, I think there is a sense of entitlement that conservatives, that the people who tend to be demographically conservative tend to have a sense of entitlement to a certain way of life, or a certain, like, to jobs, to other types of things. And I think that they feel like it's being stolen from them by people that and I also think that there is an element in which the internet and social media have allowed any type of like minority voice of conservatives, for example, or like people who feel like they're losing power or feel like they're victims of the left, to find themselves and to amplify, and to the outsized amplification, given the actual size of the group, if that makes sense, of like their concerns. And so that's, so that's kind of how I feel, because demographically, demographically, I don't think that much has changed in terms of where people live and like how exposed they are to people of different race or different like kind of political persuasions or anything else. What I think has happened is people's individual ability to find pockets of support in places online and to kind of solidify their victimhood and worldview. Does that make sense? You look like you're not buying.
Do you think this has happened? Do you think this has happened? Do you think this is widespread with conservatives, or do you think it's apolitical? Do you think this is not even a political thing? I mean, or like consciously political, or what do you?
What do you mean? Like, do I think that
sense?
well, do I think it's
do you think it's every conservative feels this way? Do you think that people who aren't even political feel this way? What do you?
Oh, I mean, I guess well, how are we defining conservative? I guess if we're defining it as a political group that is like typically of the Republican variety, then I guess it's like by definition a political issue. But if we're kind of, do I think that there are people who? So yes, I guess I think it's a political issue. I think that we're going to be defining this victimhood. You first have to define. If it's conservative victimhood, you first have to define how you're defining conservative. And I think you can't define conservative without being political. Does that make sense? Like, that's like, it is.
Yeah, no, I meant people who aren't even political, who are like me these last few weeks, who haven't been following the news closely. And, that, I feel like there's some of that, they feel like victims who aren't even, who don't watch Tucker Carlson and stuff.
Oh yeah, we're really sorry for you, Windsor. You're such a victim coming on a little fun to talk about the news.
I am.
So the more the more I listen to you guys,
I just mean people who aren't engaged.
The more I listen to you talk about this, the more I think, and I'm handicapped here by not having read the genealogy of morality in about 25 years. But the more I think this is a picture perfect sort of Nietzschean story that conservatives watched for I don't know how many decades as liberals and particularly minority groups successfully defined the conversation by the terms of victimhood. And they finally, and for many years, they responded to this by saying, well, that's just the way the world is, right? There are certain hierarchies in the world that we, i.e. the powerful, apropos of Kate's, have certain privileges by dint of the fact of who we are. And these claims started losing over and over and over again. And so what did they learn? They learned that the vocabulary that succeeds, the ones that cause other people to acknowledge obligation to you in our moral vocabulary, is claiming discrimination and claiming victimhood. Never mind the fact that, of course, the claims have to have some legitimacy in order to have like when Tucker Carlson claims that he's, the victim of discrimination of some sort, and that people, as he did last night, quite literally, that, that he's being replaced because the parents have adopted children that they love more than him. They're giving more goodies than they are him. That's a laughable claim, but that they've really recognized that the vocabulary of the recompense to the victim that the left has used, I don't know since when, it's the vocabulary of the left for a very long time, is actually the one that wins arguments. And I think there's a weird homage to the moral logic of the left in these claims.
I will just say I completely agree with that, and I'll add on. So imagine going like Imagine if, like, and they did, plantation owners claim to be victims of the North. They claim to be victims of, and the Southern slave owners claim to be victims of the North. And of course, we look back and we say, what a joke. They weren't victims. They were victimizing all of these other people that they were enslaving and everything else. And I think that there's a similar, but you're right that there is a power in the rhetoric around victims, because it has, I think that I loved the meat reference, because I hadn't like pegged it to that, Ben, but I think that that's exactly kind of the exact idea of where it comes from. But claiming victimhood is its own sense of empowerment if you can get enough people together and then norms and values shift in your direction and the history shifts in your direction. If you're making
norms there, people.
I do. Please drink. So hold on. Toy Tanks doesn't want to come on, but I'm just going to share really quickly this great poll that he just talked about, which was this New Economist poll that says that how much discrimination do the following people face in America today? And this is among Trump voters: 15% Jewish, 11% Muslims, 10% Asians, 10% immigrants, 9% Black people, women, and 49% conservatives. So that is just kind of an incredible poll. And it's
a completely astonishing
think that's related to a lot. Yeah.
I'm going to share
to be also clear,
because I haven't read it.
Sure.
Forever.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, cool.
Okay.
I will also say that part of why I think this is because of how my conversations go with the Trump voters that I know and how they talk about things. They are talking about things as if that the world is changing, things are being taken away from them. They are not empowered to stop it from happening. And other people are doing this to them. And so that's kind of, I think that this would be a great book. This is an awesome idea, Windsor.
I think the two of you should write it and let me put my, I can use my byline. Y'all are way ahead of me in terms of thinking about this. I was just thinking in terms of areas, academia, culturally. Also, I think the right, they're losing so much culturally. I mean, this Major League Baseball stuff, which I heard Ron McDaniels had some tweet like, guess what I'm not doing today? Watching baseball. I mean, they feel like they're losing. They feel like they're, being excluded or whatever. I mean, I think that's, that's where I feel like they're being sincere about it.
Yeah.
Ironically,
maybe not Ron McDaniel. Maybe she's a cynic, but maybe not her. But I bet there are a lot of people who did take that sincerely as like they're being left out of American culture or something.
I mean, ironically, I think there's a lot of sincerity in it. I think people are genuinely feel as though they are being victimized by lots of people's claims of victimization, and that they sincerely feel that the need to honor other people's claims of systemic discrimination or individual discrimination, or the claim that you can't use certain words or describe things in the way that feels natural and comfortable to you, is actually victimizing you in some way. And I think that, and of course, look, I have my own agreements and disagreements with those substantive claims, but the notion that those claims themselves constitute a victimization it's kind of amazing the degree to which that has caught on.
Yeah. I was thinking,
go
ahead, Windsor.
No, go ahead. I'm drinking water and beer. Go ahead. I'm double.
Do you remember the Duke, the Duke false rape case? And do you remember the Rolling Stone false rape case? Remember those two things?
I have it in print. I was a subscriber.
So, those, to me, and this is not about race or conservative, but those in the traditional kind of victim of a crime, victim of things, and the role of gender there, and the role of kind of stereotypes of how we thought about things, and the way the fact pattern flipped out in and out of like kind of who was a victim and who wasn't. And we don't know until we have all of the facts marshaled, and the power of media or norms to create victims or dismantle victims was fascinating to me. So so I think about that a lot in like a meta sense as a person when I say like believe women. I know the sentiment that I mean when I say that, and I generally think I know the sentiment that other women say when they say that, or other people say when they say that. But I do also realize, like, I think about those stories, and I think that they're rare exceptions in sexual assault cases for sure. But that, like, it's just like victimhood is such a completely such a full fact-based thing, and it is also valenced with so much history. And so I think there's a lot to be. I mean, I think it's a deeply complicated word that gets thrown around a lot without much thought.
I mean,
actually, Joseph Epstein wrote a great piece for the New York Times Magazine in 1989 about victimology, and of course he was saying liberals or victims, so he was doing that thing, but it was a kind of an interesting sociological thing. It was the attractions of victimhood, and now if you read it now, it's like, oh, this is conservatives. I mean, this explains why conservatives like it so much. And also, I think Robert Nisbet, the sociologist, he wrote an essay about it too. I think I have it here. I think it's up here somewhere. But yeah, he wrote about it too. It's called like victimology or something. Both of theirs were called that, I think.
I mean, the thing about victimology, though, is that it does not prepare you well to wield power.
Say more.
No.
What do you mean by
that? So wielding power is fundamentally an exercise in deciding how goods and bads, for that matter, get distributed, right? And so if you decide that you are going to do X for X people, but not for not X people, and that may be a totally good decision, it may be a right decision, but it will leave have-nots, which will characterize themselves as victims. And the moment you decide that the only authenticity, the only real source of moral decision making lies in victimhood, which is what the conservative movement has decided.
Yeah.
You make it very difficult for yourself to make hard decisions, right? So the conservative movement can tell you now that they're for Dr. Seuss, right? But that is actually not a hard decision. It's really badly positioned to answer the question, how would you distribute COVID risk and goods, right? And so that's a really hard question for modern conservatives to answer, because who is morally entitled in their worldview to the preference of society in COVID that they deny as a serious problem, that they insist is the right. So like once you get into this kind of warped reality in which you're accepting that the moral authority comes from victimization, but you're completely inaccurately describing the world of victimization. And by the way, you're not answering basic questions like, how do we decide, should we aim to vaccinate large numbers of people? How quickly? How should we focus on vaccines or masks? Right? You're not asking the right questions, but you're accepting the moral logic of victimization as the source of authority. It ties you in knots, right?
Yeah.
So contrast that for a moment with the left, which has its own pathologies, of course, but which says, hey, there are certain historically discriminated against populations that we owe a certain solicitude to as a result of this historical pattern. By the way, those groups of people are suffering unduly in the COVID pandemic, particularly people of color, and Black and brown communities have disproportionate impacts. So it leads you to certain coherent answers to certain questions that are present now in the distribution and the exercise of power. What do you focus on? Well, you focus on the communities that are most at risk, right? But if you buy the bullshit of conservative victimization, where does it lead you in the exercise of power? And the answer is
white supremacy.
Well, if you're serious about it, it leads you to very ugly places. But often where it leads you is to incoherent places and vengeance places, right? A focus on very unimportant questions like, Major League Baseball in Georgia rather than voting rights in Georgia, right? It just leads you to focus on the wrong questions and to incoherent governance.
This is such a good point. I'm going to start bringing people in, but Windsor, go ahead.
This is also way too heavy for me because I haven't even thought about this stuff in like 6 months. So
do you want to talk about your shoes?
But I will.
Do you want to talk?
We can. I have them here. But I do want to recommend, I bought Richard Hofstadter. Library of America came out with the book of collected writings of Richard Hofstadter. He was the historian at Columbia, and it has anti-intellectualism in America and the paranoid style, and it has some of his unpublished essays on Goldwater and
the great history essay, the great book, The Progressive Historians. I mean, he was an incredible. The Progressive Historians is a great book. He was an amazing man, and of course, the father of Douglas Hofstadter of the University of, I believe, Indiana, who wrote Göttel, Escher, Bach, and I Am a Strange Loop, and a number of other wonderful mathematical I don't know what to call them, ruminations.
But read his essays on pseudo conservatives, and you will. It's exactly like Republicans now. It is eerie. They are so good, and they're in his book, The Paranoid Style, and I think that's actually one of the weaker essays in the book. The Paranoid Style. It's still very good, but the other essays are just.
Can you drop a link for that book in the chat just so people have it, or that would be great. I would also like that so that I can just make sure I didn't get the name. You said Leonard Hofstadter.
No,
Richard Hofstadter. It's the Library of America.
I've never heard of that.
I'm Googling.
Okay. Tony Cava. Hello. Oh my gosh, you've got a dog shirt on. It's Momo in space.
He is. It is a dog shirt kind of day. May the eyes of dog shirt fall upon you and bless you.
Yes, these eyes don't follow you across the screen. But,
see, these eyes move wherever you're looking. They're tracking you.
Yeah. Once those eyes have been seen, they cannot be unseen, is the thing. So,
as Virginia said, they're nipply and weird.
Go ahead.
Virginia Heffernan said that?
Yes.
Virginia hates Ben's dog shirts.
Yeah, she really has a problem with the dog.
The rest of us really do too, but no, that's okay. No, not really. Um, okay, I'm sorry about that. The conversation may have moved on since I posted the question, but you guys were talking about like conservatives and why they feel victimhood, and Kate made really great points about conservatives and feeling put upon and white supremacy and stuff. But I'm just wondering, should we be calling the modern Republican Party and their current voters conservatives any longer, or does that word just grant them a level of seriousness and gravitas that they're really not due?
Such a good question.
To quote David Frum, conservatives are what conservatives do. So if the vast majority of conservatives are this way, then you kind of have to call them that. If they didn't dominate the party, then maybe not. But I don't know what else you call them. I mean, it ruins the word. But I mean,
I completely disagree with that.
Really?
Wait.
Yeah, I really do.
What do you call them? So, but you have to come upon some kind of agreed upon term, right? So if you call them one thing, no one else calls them something.
I don't think we have a nomenclature, a good nomenclature, or an agreed upon nomenclature. But I think conservatism, in the sense that we traditionally use the word, is a combination of libertarian leaning economics, a sort of Burkean temperament, and a tendency to go slow on radical social change. And
who does that describe now?
And it describes, virtually nobody now, particularly the Burkean temperament part. And so the right way to think about it is that the American right has abandoned conservatism and now reflects something else, right? And what you want to characterize the American right as having abandoned conservatism in favor of, I think there's a good, whether you call it authoritarian populism or, sort of light fascism, or like, I don't know what the right word for that is, but it seems to me objectively not conservatism as we've traditionally understood it. And rather than ruining the word and the set of ideas that word encapsulates, some of which are honorable and some of which are less so, why don't we just say whatever the American right is, it has very little to do with conservatism.
See, my feeling is that conservatism died, I don't know exactly when, but kind of shortly after the Soviet Union collapsed, because the Buckleyite conservatism was fusionism. So it was the kind of social conservatism, the libertarian-ish, on economics, and anti-communism. And once anti-communism, once that pillar was taken away, you just had, the libertarianism and the social conservatism. And also, by the way, by the time the Soviet Union collapsed, the libertarian streak was pretty much gone too, because George H.W. Bush, that wasn't libertarian, and he wasn't unpopular because he wasn't libertarian enough. He was fine, and in terms of the majority people, there was only a hardcore of conservatives who were pissed off about the growth in government and stuff. And he had the Americans with Disabilities Act and some other, like, quote, big government programs. But so the libertarian-ish, I think that was actually kind of gone in Reagan's early part of his second term. So you really just had the kind of cultural issues left at that point, and I think that's all you had left after the Soviet Union collapse. So I don't know. Even though there are still interesting arguments on the right about foreign policy, about Kosovo, I mean, there are some interesting arguments with John Bolton and Charles Krauthammer then.
But of course, those are not different actually from the arguments in the center, and right, that those are questions of how muscular our American foreign policy should.
Those are more tactical. Those are more tactical questions, I guess. They weren't philosophical.
Right.
I guess.
So I guess I would like to preserve the word conservatism to describe the intellectual movements that you're describing as having been abandoned in that period of time. And I don't know, like I would call what Trump was Trumpist. You know, there was just nothing conservative about it. And so why, like, just in the interests of having words that mean something, I kind of prefer to use the word conservative for people who are actually intellectually trying to conserve something.
Yeah, that's a really, I like that. I'm very embarrassed
Okay,
now that I
but
didn't know Richard
the
Hoff.
masses are gonna win though. Sorry, the masses are gonna win when it comes to language. The more people who use a word a certain way, they're gonna beat, even if they're using it incorrectly, they're gonna win. So I'm just
Well,
trying
that's
to
what
look at
happened
it
with
realistically.
liberal.
Right.
Yeah.
Why shouldn't it happen with
I can't
conservative?
define liberal. I can't define conservative.
This is one of the reasons that I
Sorry.
hate the terms neoliberal and liberal and like, I don't know. I think it's all, and libertarianism, like it's all just like the same root word in completely different intonations to whatever it is that people are trying to say. Frank, so nice to see you. The floor is yours.
Thanks for bringing me in. And actually, I just want to say that last bit of conversation, I think I agree with Ben that it'd be great if the word conservative continued to have some sort of coherent ideological component to it, and that Trumpist as an alternative for certain kinds of things makes sense. But it's a really fuzzy line, and as Windsor points out, what people call things is what they're going to be called. The question that I put in the ask a question box was, to what extent is conservative victimhood the tip of the identity politics iceberg for mostly white Americans? And I think if it feels like doing a Venmo diagram, the other parts that are in there would be like Christianity, masculinity, different kinds of things that kind of overlap with, we'll call it conservative for the sake of discussion right now, approaches to life. I have an aunt who was, agitated that she just can't say Merry Christmas to whoever she wants. And her question to me was, why do I have to change? I'm like, well, you're not recognizing that there were these other people around all along, and now we finally are. And I guess, and I would agree with what was being said earlier, that this is just deeply felt among a large number of people as grievance, and because it really is about their identity as Americans and what it means to be American, and on that very basic level. So I'm sorry, that's a little bit of my explication of how I understand the question, but I'm really interested in what you have to say.
Windsor?
Go ahead.
No, you're the guest. The question's for you.
No, you're no.
I mean, look.
I said before the show I was going to talk less.
I mean, I think that is right. A huge amount of it is encapsulated in Frank's account of why do I have to change? And people who are comfortable and who believe the world is basically just, when asked from the point of view of others to give up privilege, to use our current vocabulary for such things, or when asked to adapt to the comfort level of others, it can be uncomfortable, and that can give rise to resentment. And I think that resentment can give rise to identity politics. And that is, I don't think that's avoidable. I think we tend to create identities around many things, and resentments are one of them. But it also used to be the case that most white people did not identify as white people. Most white people identified as members of constituent groups. Italian Americans did not think of themselves as white people. They thought of themselves as Italians. Jews really didn't think of themselves as white people, most of them having fled being murdered by other white people. They thought of themselves as Jews, and actually a lot of them still do. And, you know, it is only the last 50 years where very large numbers of what, from a minority point of view in the United States, consider white people start to think of themselves that way outside of, you know, certain areas where the white community is very sort of Scotch-Irish and you know, Scottish and English by extraction, particularly in the South. And, you know, the more that happens, the more you start to get white identity politics that is not just the sort of traditional Ku Klux Klan. And remember, the old Klan and the new Klan too, to a large degree, is against Blacks, Jews, and Catholics, right? And there's a lot of white people who are excluded by that formulation. A consolidation of a more white identity as such is a relatively recent thing.
I kind of think of, pardon me in advance if I don't make sense, because I haven't really fleshed this out, but Jonah Goldberg, he wrote a book, The Tyranny of Cliches, where he kind of accused liberals of not owning up to their liberalism. They weren't, like, not admitting their ideological biases and stuff. And I kind of thought of that as kind of like white people. They don't identify as liberals as such. Some do, but most of them, they're just like, I'm liberal, it's normal and stuff. And I kind of think of that as like white people. Like, I don't think of myself as, hey, I'm white, you know, I'm white, but it's not like something I really think about much. So I think that is, in terms of a lot of conservative grievances about liberal bias and that sort of stuff, I think it may be kind of like that with white. Does that make sense at all? That analogy just kind of popped in my head.
Yeah, but I mean, I think that the counter to that people of color and other people would say, or men, like, you probably don't think, I don't know, well, you probably do think of yourself as a man, so it's not like the exact same thing. But my general idea is that if you are in the position where everyone around you, that, like, when you are in the majority or something, you are like, I don't know if you've ever gone, you know, I would challenge you to say that you felt like you weren't aware that you were white if you went to a place that was majority Black, for example. Like, I think you would then suddenly become very aware of
But there's a flip side of this, which is if you go to a place where the salient ethnic religious tensions are not between white people and non-white people, your sense of whiteness evaporates completely. So we have a flare-up of sectarian tensions in Northern Ireland right now. And these are along super traditional Catholic Protestant lines. And, you know, they get as bloody as anything, as hierarchical as anything. And Ireland's about as white as it gets, you know? And so the point is, it requires an environment where white people put aside a huge amount of traditional things that cause them to have violent, you know, religious wars, serfdom, you know, all the things that have caused white people to oppress one another. And that doesn't really start happening in the United States. I mean, it starts happening very early, but, you know, you have in the 1830s, you have efforts to ban beer all over the place because Germans drink it, right? And those are white people that are considered.
And we hate those people. Beer is great.
Well, that wasn't the way people.
I'm anti-German now.
That wasn't the way people that wasn't the way Protestants in Ohio felt about it for a long time.
I'm pro-German, right? I guess.
And it wasn't the way people felt about Italian Americans and Irish Americans, and certainly not Jews. And so it's a very strange environment that we have in the United States, where we kind of put aside centuries and centuries of hating each other and identified skin color as the relevant factor.
Yeah. David Botts. I see you have, okay, so Ben, this is the video that I took of the turkey mating dance.
Oh,
over here.
That's tomorrow's Beast of the Day.
And then what is this your Beast of the Day today, Ben?
The red bird of paradise from Indonesia was a few days ago, and it is not a plant, it's not a flower, it's an actual bird.
Cool.
Ben, I wanted you to tweet my mom's eagle that she took.
I didn't see it. Can you DM it to me?
I DM'd. I'll DM it to you.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. David.
Good afternoon. This is really interesting discussion about privilege and etc. So I thought about my question, and so I'll reframe it. So today we observed the passing of both Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, and DMX. And to me, it's a bit of a story of contrast. In particular, when we think about the right and their current love and fetishization of the monarchy from the UK, which seems somewhat contrary to the forming of the United States and independence and this sort of thing. But it's such
such
a contrast. It strikes me as interesting, and what does that contrast say about? Somebody wants to say hi, Kate. What does that contrast say? Very good. About us as a culture and society.
Great question. I love the highlighting of that, because it's something that drives me absolutely batshit. I do not understand the fetishism by any Americans of the English monarchy, given especially not ones who claim to be patriots and like we're like, no, this entire thing, we crushed it so that we could become America. And like that, it's just a very, but I'm interested in what Windsor thinks about this too.
Why? Because you want me to talk smack about my cousins now? Is that it?
Oh yeah. Wait, are you related to the royals? Oh, did you grow up in that house?
No,
and Ben grew up in
he's
the
a
other
Windsor,
house?
man.
He's a Windsor. Oh, wait, really?
Well, Windsor's my mom's maiden name, and she always said they stole our name because they were Germans and they changed their name in World War One.
Oh yeah, I forgot that about
know
your
the history at all,
okay.
because I'm not related to them. Yeah, but I don't get it. I put this in my notes to think about like a couple weeks ago when there's at one point the conservatives were hating on Meghan Markle and praising Putin at once, and I just thought that was really weird. And hating on Biden, so they were loving the English monarchy, loving the dictatorship in Russia, and hating their own government. I thought that was weird. And also, I read an article for USA Today a couple years ago, just not trashing, that's overstated, but criticizing the English monarchy. And I had some conservative friends just hating on me. They were like viscerally pissed off. And I thought that was weird, because it's this tabloid trash kind of stuff now. I mean, even if you like the institution, you can criticize individuals in it, right? I mean, or even the institution is kind of silly now. I mean, it's really just purely for tourism. It doesn't serve any kind of interesting political function, or I mean, any like useful political function. I don't think. They're like Peter Hitchens would say, yes, it absolutely does. The presidency here kind of serves something similar to that in terms of you want to have something that everyone just kind of worships. And I don't know. But I find it silly. I'm kind of like Christopher Hitchens. I'm kind of a Republican. I think it's time to. I mean, it's not my country, but I think it's just so antiquated. You can't come up with a logical, rational reason for having it other than tourism. But I do find
Ben?
that question very interesting, though. Why do conservatives fetishize the English monarchy, and other than just being obsessed with tradition? But if the English monarchy, if they were black, would they still
Apparently
revere it?
not. We
I don't
learned
think
from
so.
Meghan Markle.
Yeah, apparently not. Apparently,
Yeah.
very specifically not.
I mean, so
Exactly.
we should go to Genevieve and then wrap because it's 6:02.
Yeah.
Genevieve has
Genevieve.
turned into a black rectangle. Now,
No, she's here. Hi. Hi. 3
Can
more
you-
weeks, Genevieve.
I know.
And then you're almost there.
Thank God. Okay, so I'll try to be quick, but kind of circling back to the conversation before about victimhood, and this question isn't meant to coddle or bifurcate that, because I agreed with a lot of what was said. But do you think that there needs to be a greater acknowledgement of the country's wealth disparity and the economic hardships that are being experienced by Americans in certain economic classes? Because a lot of the times the pushback you get is, well, there's so many, when you discuss it with people who are pro-Trump, well, I haven't benefited, I don't see this, and it's not my experience. Kind of ties both together. But thanks, everybody.
Windsor.
Well, I
Show
mean,
us your shoes, Windsor.
There's so many rich Trumpists. I don't know. I mean,
Well, this
in
has always
terms of
been
a
the thing about
general
Trump that never made
point,
sense
sure.
to me.
Yeah. I just don't think it's economic. Though, I mean, in terms of generally, should there be more emphasis on this? Sure, I guess. I'm not against it, but I'm not against it. I mean, I'm against it if it's just in terms of who's a bigger victim. Look at this group; they have less money, therefore they're entitled to this, and you're not, or something. Then I'm against that. If it's just for kind of just what's the term, like one-upmanship or something. If it's just for that, I'm against it. But I feel like that's a lot of it too. I feel like the Trumpists use the economic stuff so cynically. I don't know. But I do think there are real economic issues, though. I mean, I do think this was something like in my libertarian phase, I would have just like laughed, rolled my eyes at this. But I do think inequality is a serious issue. I don't have a solution at all. But
Isn't the relevant, like, it seems to me the Trumpist right is all about cultural grievance. There are many, many components of cultural grievance. Economics gives rise to some of them. Race gives rise to some of them. Decline of, sort of prestige and status of certain socioeconomic groups contributes to some of it. But the idea that what fundamentally drives Trumpism is a set of economic views strikes me as indefensible. And I can't see that as even a plausible hypothesis.
Well, I mean, if that were the case, wouldn't a lot of Black Americans be pro-Trump? Like, wouldn't more than 10%, whatever it is, I don't even know, but it's something like that.
Look, neither coalition is held together by economic interests. The Democratic coalition is a coalition of minority groups of various sorts and highly educated, socioeconomically advantaged people in urban and suburban areas. There is no common economic interest between those groups of people. There's common moral interests. There's common ideological interests, but there's no common. And similarly, the Republican coalition is a coalition of working class white people and rich business elites. What's the common economic interest?
And mostly working class white males too.
Yeah,
and the women are rural.
I think it's a very hard argument to seems to me to defend that what holds the parties together is some shared class interests, the way we understand it in a Marxian class sense, Marxist framework class sense.
Yes, but I think that to Genevieve's point, why do you have it? I think that part of the thing that she's getting at is the idea that there's people that were out of work or displaced from work that are working class and very poor whites that have clung to the Trump idea. And I agree with Ben that it's out of an actual cultural thing, even though they say that it's for economic reasons, because there is no logical connection between the way that Trump's life or his entire, how he gathered his wealth or how his wealth is passed on, that should resonate with working class individuals, except, and I will make this one exception, except that every working class individual in America might think and hope that one day they could become Donald Trump, and that by supporting a person like Donald Trump, they can become kind of that type of wealth will someday maybe accrue to them or their children.
No, but that's about political messaging that is effective to various communities. It's not about the class interests, in fact, of those communities.
Yes, of course. It's just a construction.
We should wrap. Windsor Mann, you're a great American. It's great to see your face and your mullet and the beard.
Scruffy, it looks great.
You like it?
The scruffy foreground with the perfectly polished background. It's wonderful. Give our best to your mom. We will be back tomorrow. It'll be just us.
Oh yeah, it's
right?
Saturday.
It's Saturday.
Yeah,
we're going to plan the show, and then Kate's going to bring a mystery guest on Sunday.
Wait, it's your mystery guest?
No, I brought Olivia Troy last weekend. It's your mystery guest.
How is it possible that this happens every week? Completely genuine. Every week I just completely lose track.
Yeah, so Kate's gonna bring a mystery guest on Sunday, and we're gonna plan the show tomorrow. And all of that is gonna start 22 hours and 51 minutes from now.
And until then, we can all agree that we really like beer. Oh, we're not allowed to have fun anymore. But until then, we can agree that we all really like beer. Right, Ben?
Yeah, the
Okay,
Germans. The Germans. It was right of the Ohio Germans to fight off the anti-beer laws, and it is a good thing that we collectively defeated that round of nativism.